Parasharaya vachasarojam amalam gitartha gandhotkatam nanakyanaka kesaram harikata sambodhana bodhitam loke sajana shatpader rahara pepi yamanam mura bhuyat bharata pankajam kalimala pradvam sinasreyase. May the stainless lotus of Mahabharata, which was born on the waters of the words of Vyasa, the son of Parashara, which has the message of the Gita for its overpowering fragrance, which contains numerous narratives proclaiming the glory of Hari as its stamens, and which is sucked again and again in great joy every day by the honeysuckers of virtuous men, may it prevail for the good of all who want to be cleansed of the taint of the age of Kali. So today, I want to focus on a few words that appear again and again in the Gita. Words that begin with the small word swa. Now, swa by itself means inner essence, or very advisedly you could say Atman, but most of the words we're going to concentrate on are compound words, that is swa plus something else. So the three major concepts that we'll start with are swabhava, swadharma, and svakarma. Now, swabhava refers to our essential nature, that is, the aggregate of the strong tendencies that we're born with. It's kind of the law of one's own being. Each person then will be slightly different. It's not exactly a psychological makeup, but it's sort of a goading that comes from within. Like, this I need to do, this is my nature, I need to do this. Okay, I mean, that's as it expresses in action. But just in oneself, the word swabhava is without action, but just as one is. Okay, so it's our essential character, and each person is unique. In the Gita, chapter 8, verse 3, it equates this term to the adhyatma, that is the aggregation of elements in the individual personality or the supreme self. So in other words, individual bhava, swabhava, actually, as we cultivate our spiritual nature, transmutes into universal swabhava, the entire nature of the universe. So there's another word similar to it, which is swabhavaja, which means that which is born with us, that which comes along with us right from the get-go. In other words, it's an inborn thing. You might have talked to parents or something, people who say, I don't know where this kid came from. I mean, it's just like, there's something really different here, It's like, nobody in the family is like this. This is an inborn nature. This is something that's expressing even at a very early age that people can note as being something very particular to that individual. So, what place does the individual's nature play in spiritual discipline? Well, first of all, it's not anything that's imposed from the outside or laid on us by life's compulsions or the mind's error. It's an authenticity that comes, it just, well, I've used the word natural many times already, but you can't really hide it. You can try, but it's going to find its way out, okay? It's going to find it's going to express itself one way or another. I mean, how many times have you heard stories of people who pursued a certain career for a certain length of time, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I always wanted to do X, okay? And so they do a complete flip, do something completely different, and then become very happy, that kind of a thing. It's an authentic expression of who we really are. Action should be rightly regulated. This is what they call niyatam karma. Intrinsically one's own, that's what I was looking for. Intrinsically one's own, evolved from within, in harmony with the truth of one's being. So swabhava is a very important term. As I've understood it, because of other commentators, there's the first three. Swabhava kind of leads to swadharma, leads to svakarma. So swabhava, our own inner nature. Now we have to talk about swadharma. Swadharma, of course, dharma is not really translatable into English. We have a lot of attempts, approximations, things like righteousness. It's really closely related and actually sort of replaced the ancient Sanskrit word rita, which was like the cosmic order. It was related to the cosmic order, things that happen built in to the nature of the universe. And that word got sort of supplanted, and the word dharma was substituted for it. But it has sort of that same idea, that it's the natural expression of righteousness, the way that things should be. Now, in the original Brahmanic model, this idea of swadharma, one's own dharma, was generalized so as to fit all the categories of society, including, not just the four castes, but, others as well. And nothing was considered to be outside the realm of the ultimate values. So remember, there's four values. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Dharma's first. Dharma comes first. So it arises, swadharma arises from one's obligations towards one's nature, one's class, one's social position, other latent tendencies, place and time, what's appropriate, in other words. So what is appropriate to be done? Now, Swami Atmarupananda came up with a really pithy way, and I thought, oh, this is great. He translates swadharma as finding your own way. And I think that's really great. Because the action that follows this is in tune with one's disposition. And if it's in tune with one's disposition, then it is one's swadharma. According to the commentary by Swami Bhavananda, the idea of eking out an earthly existence is wretched. This negative attitude should be elevated to a positive one of adoring the Lord with the life one lives. So swadharma becomes the means for gaining wisdom and the attainment of godhood. Now, I can't remember the name of the book, but this was written by Sharma, is another sort of commentary. Swadharma is the unmistakable, this concept recognition of the influence of natural forces in man's organism. Man is a being that belongs to two worlds, natural and spiritual. How are we to direct the natural man in us wisely? The answer is contained in this concept of swadharma. Here's what I was looking for. The English words that we use sometimes include law, virtue, righteousness, duty even. All of this is subsumed under the word dharma. Dharma is universal and swadharma is individual. The individual must be sublimated in order to gain the universal. We have first to be true to the law of our own being. We have to achieve the best we are capable of by perfecting our natural endowments and making the most of our circumstances. Then this must be made subservient to a divine purpose. Dharma is never divorced from yoga. It is a way to that union and never has any value independent of that end. Nature, therefore, is not an enemy of the spirit, but its great ally. Swadharma connotes the ease and spontaneity, the line of least resistance. That's really important, because if we're doing something that we're not suited for, or we're being compelled somehow to do it for social reasons or family reasons or whatever, it's like going against the grain, and we feel a certain discomfort. Whereas if we're following our natural purpose in life, then there's a sort of ease and spontaneity. Swadharma also sometimes connotes grace and beauty, as well as efficiency. And when our duties are organically related to our natural endowments, then this shows up obviously. You know, when I was in middle school, I went to a private school, and the teachers used to say, "The cream always rises." This was an important concept that they had as teachers, because you can't keep the brilliant down too long, and or not just the brilliant, but anybody who's suitable for a certain purpose, anybody who is really good. For instance, I can remember, I think they brought this up even in relation to like the school newspaper. Okay, the people who are naturally want to communicate are going to gravitate toward working on the school newspaper, et cetera. It was like that with many different things. But so this concept of being suitable according to one's nature is not exclusive to India by any means, but this terminology is. Okay, so we started with swabhava, our inner nature. We went to swadharma, which is like our duty, our righteous purpose in life. And then svakarma is the next thing, and that is how it expresses in action. Devoted, this is Gita chapter 18, verse 45. Devoted each to his own duty, one attains the highest perfection. This has been called the greatest verse in the Gita, but it's also the easiest, and it's for everyone. It's not for monastics necessarily. It's for everybody. Devoted to his own duty, one attains the highest perfection. In 1846, by worshiping with his own proper action him from whom beings have their origin, him by whom all this universe is pervaded, one finds perfection or fulfillment. So this becomes like a single verse prescription for spiritual living. So I'll read it again. By worshiping with his own proper action him from whom beings have their origin, him by whom all this universe is pervaded, one finds perfection or fulfillment. So this is actually the key to what is called karma yoga. That is turning action into worship. And that's something that's a chemistry sort of thing that we have to accomplish inside. So that was a single verse prescription for living spiritual life. Any and every work becomes worship when the attitude is sound. The right attitude aids purification of mind. Attitude is what accomplishes the conversion from a mere person into a universal being. No being is superfluous or useless in this cosmic setting. Now, understanding these three concepts alone is enough to dispel the prevalent misconception of Hinduism as being fatalistic, as it places responsibility squarely in each person's hands. I want to bring up a story from, or an example, I should say, from the Mahabharata, which is the character of Vidura. Vidura was this very complicated, the way people were born in the Mahabharata. But anyway, he was the third child of a king by his sannyasin brother through a maidservant in the who was attendant to the queen. Okay, so this maidservant, the first child was born blind. The second was born very pale, and then it ended up that he had a curse put on him, and he ended up dying young and all that. So, but the third one, this Vidur, was highly intelligent and very moral. And he ended up being like the advisor to the king, his half brother. And he always he was not considered a kshatriya because he had been born from this servant girl. A kshatriya meaning in the kingly caste, but he never strayed from the truth. And when he found, for another example is, when he found about the danger that the Pandavas were in, he had them rescued. So he always did the right thing. He always said the right thing. If the king needed to be called on something that he did incorrectly, he did nicely. He was very diplomatic, but he let people know exactly where they stood in relation to the highest ideals. So this story of Vidura, in the end, when it came to the war, the Kurukshetra war, of course, he wasn't a warrior. So he just stepped aside. He did not participate at all. But he was a devotee of Krishna. He understood who Krishna was. He understood that he was privileged to be living at the same time as Krishna, privileged to be able to invite him to his house, have him serve him some food, have him be a guest in the palace of the king, and provide for him everything that needed to be provided, etc. So this Vidura then ended up, of course, surviving the war because he was a non-combatant. And so he was one of the few who the story starts out with, who we end up with alive at the end. So anyway, he was the perfect example of these three things: the swabhava, the swadharma, and the svakarma. He was totally true to himself from beginning to end. Now, from most of us, at least when we start spiritual life, are very fragmented. We have, they say, the 5 koshas, 5 types of bodies in one, So you've got a mental body, you've got a physical body, you've got an intellectual body, pranic body. So, but most of us, these different bodies are like misaligned, okay? They're not straight up. They're not fused, okay? So everything is going in different directions. Our thoughts are going different than our actions. Our actions are going different than our words, etc. Okay? We're not, we're the opposite, I guess I should say, of Vidura, who everything was aligned. Okay, so that's one way to think of it. Another way to think of it is like wavelengths. Let's say, each of those bodies are on a different wavelength, okay? So of course, if you have a radio, or let's say the radio is your intention, let's say, you're trying to find, you're trying to tune in. You can't tune in because the different frequencies are all interfering with one another, and you're not going to get a true read of what it is, where you're coming from, and what it is you ought to be doing. So all you get is this static. If you end up hearing the station, let's say, tuning in a little bit at all, the message might be garbled or incoherent. And this is what we would call, that we take for normal, we take for granted, this is the state of an uneducated mind-body. Mind-body being a unit, one thing. No, now, it's not our fault. This is the way it is. This is the Kali Yuga. No one teaches you how to live. We're all in the same boat. We make mistakes all the time. We're in sort of like a remedial class because we're way behind in learning this stuff that they're taught from, they were in the ancient days taught, to sit quietly. They're taught to meditate right from the beginning, et cetera, as a daily routine. And we really need a book, and I think it exists actually, Spirituality for Dummies. But it's not just the book. We need to imbibe that whole thing. So I invite people to look at your condition, and as a start, admit how fractured and fragmented your life is. And so that is the opposite of being authentic. Let's list some of the things that manifest as being non-authentic, okay? Hidden agendas, game playing, obfuscations, disingenuous speech, insincerity, crookedness, pretentiousness, outright lying. This is the opposite of authentic. You'll see in the Gita, it does mention straightforwardness. Arjavam, I think the word is. Straightforwardness is it's like a virtue. You say what you mean what you say, you do according to what you say. Period. Very simple. It doesn't take a whole lot of energy. But lying and covering up and misleading and all that takes a lot more energy. So this disjointed, disorganized, incoherent, broken, disconnected situation is what we take to be, for the vast majority of people, is what we take to be normal. I think it's very interesting that only humans and AI can mislead. They have determined now that AI does mislead. Animals are very straightforward. Even the predator, you can watch the predators, they'll stalk their prey, they'll ambush their prey, whatever. But they don't pretend that they're not ambushing their prey. That they're doing what they do, There's no pretense here, like, oh, I'm not really going to eat you. No. Yeah, well, I'm got your supper. I'm going to eat you. Okay. So, all these things should normally coincide. So, we need to learn from our mistakes, and let's look at what we mean by learning. The definition of learning is a change of behavior. It is not an accumulation of information. That is not learning. That's just gathering information. Okay, learning means something changes in our behavior. It's really amazing to me how many people I've seen who keep doing the same thing expecting a different result, which is also a definition of insanity, by the way. But cause and effect don't change. I mean, if you're doing the same thing under the same circumstances, it's going to turn out the same way. That's nature. And to pretend that it's going to be different is the greatest self-deception that there is. Oh, that's the other thing. A lot of this stuff is we're deceiving ourselves. We think it's okay, but we're not paying attention to the fact that I did somebody dirty, a while ago, or, told somebody something that's, bald-faced lie, No, we have to be really serious about looking at how we're actually living. And this then, when we align all these different koshas or sheaths, and they're all working in synchronization, this is full-bodied living. So it's not just mental, it's physical, it's everything. With the right resolve that's done with our whole being, we can align those things that are off balance. Over time, it takes a little time because, after all, you've lived how many years in a certain mode, and, it's going to take time to come around. Now, Ramakrishna had some helpful things to say. Everybody is drunk on something, he said. So we could say everybody is attached to something, everybody is stuck on something. There's a lot of different ways that we can put it. This doesn't excuse it. It's just saying that it's very commonplace. He also said, when you're, as an example of living spiritual life and reaching the highest spiritual attainment, it's like trying to thread a needle. If the slightest little piece of thread is astray, it won't go through the needle, okay? So he's very clear that, when you put thread through a needle, it has to be very, very one-pointed. And so that's what he's saying. Until you can get to that point, you're not going to attain the ultimate in spiritual life. Not that you can't make progress, just you can make great progress. And then in the New Testament, Jesus says, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body will be full of light." Now, your eye cannot be single unless you're completely aligned. Sometimes they try and translate that as like your inner eye or your third eye, but it's like all your faculties have to be joined in working together. I want to remind you that I'm saying you all the time, but I'm talking to myself largely. I guess been there, done that. I know how this works. So The word, in addition to alignment, I want to use is integrity. Nobody uses that word anymore. I haven't heard that word in a long time. Integrity means honesty, honorableness, incorruption, the quality or state of being complete or undivided. So, lined up, made true. Integral. To be integral is the goal. Well, it's the preliminary goal. To become an integral human being, then you can go to the divine. You can't skip that step. Sri Aurobindo Ghosh claimed to have been tutored by Swami Vivekananda while he was in prison. Now, Vivekananda had already passed away, and it's entirely possible because he wrote unbelievable, some marvelous, marvelous things, and he, as Swamiji did, Swamiji came out with the 4 yogas, but he kept telling people, they need to go together. You know, you don't just practice one. You need to have them all to go together. Well, so Aurobindo came up with the terminology integral yoga. So that covers all the bases. And I appreciate that about him. Integral, whole, complete, entire, full, perfect. So that's the kind of living that we need to do. On the other hand, the consequence of dishonesty, corruption, etc., all these things used to be shame. One's entire family could lose favor in society or even be shunned by the misbehavior of one individual in the family. But now that we all live in faceless cities, nobody knows your family, nobody knows anything, you know. So this whole idea, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, if you did something, they would say, shame on you. And, you know, nobody says that to kids anymore. So we don't even use that word, except possibly in the sense of sexual abuse. That's about it. Okay, so the opposite of integrity would be to disintegrate, that is, to fall apart, crumble, break up, okay? That's what happens when everything is misaligned. But I want to give an example. I don't want people to be bummed out by this because we have a prescription. I've also already given a couple of prescriptions earlier, but we have a really good prescription, and that is to take the name of the Lord, to do japam. And I will talk a little bit more about that later, but I just wanted to, you know, head off anybody thinking that I'm being very negative. I'm not at all. Okay, so there are a couple of other words that are swa words. And the next one I want to go to is svasthah, self-contained, self-abiding, standing in one's own self. That is, there's no need to go outside for anything. There was a song we used to sing at Ananda Ashram. What else do I need to satisfy? Everything I need is right here inside. That kind of thing. No need to go outside. Chapter 14, verse 24. Who is self-poised, balanced, contained, alike in pleasure and pain, who makes no difference between a stone, iron, and gold in the sense of desirability, who is the same toward those who love and those who hate, who is unmoved by praise and blame alike. Who is the same to agreeable and disagreeable. This is svastha, balanced, contained, self-poised. Chapter 18, verse 45. This brings in what we've already spoken about too. By being devoted to one's own natural duty, man attains to spiritual competency. Now, hear how dedication to one's own natural duty generates spiritual competency. The word here for spiritual competency is samsiddhim, complete togetherness, another way of expressing this this type of perfection. By worshiping him, this is verse 46, from whom all beings have emanated, and by whom all this universe is pervaded, through the dedicated performance of one's duty, one attains to spiritual competency. Again, this samsiddhim. Tapasyananda, in his translation of the Gita, his commentary was, be true to your inner self, even if there are some perfections in the work. You know, first of all, work is never perfect, almost never perfect. But it's better to be true to your inner self than to go against that. And I so much appreciate, for instance, some of our civil servants who have, you know, stepped aside rather than execute some of the orders that they've been given recently. I have huge respect for them. Chapter 18, verse 50. This is Krishna speaking. Now hear from me, in brief, how one who is established in the perfection of transcendence of work attains to Brahman, the highest consummation of knowledge. So he goes on to give some instructions which we're pretty much familiar with, so I'm not going to go into the details here at this point because I still have a few other miscellaneous swa words that I want to talk about. This is just miscellaneous little stuff. Okay, but this is a question. How did svadhyaya, which is translated as self-study, come to be associated with the study of scriptures? I don't quite totally understand that, because in the ancient way of studying, they would, the students would chant for years, learn everything by heart, and then study what it means. So that kind of, it's not like they had a book and here's the scripture. No, they were learning it orally, and then they would be able to expound it. If they became a pundit, they would be able to expound it later to other people. But in actuality, as this word is used in other by other teachers, self-study means you are the object of that study. You study yourself. You learn all this by interior investigation. You look, you hear what has been said in a scripture, and you look inside and you say, oh, okay, I understand that because, I've done that wrong before, or yes, that definitely coincides with my experience, or whatever. So you are the object of that study. Now, there are a few words, swa words, that don't appear in the Gita, but they're very closely related. So I want to just mention them, each briefly. Now, I've also already mentioned samsiddhi. Now, there's a svasiddha, self-established, self-fulfilled. Siddha means accomplished. There's nothing more to be perfected. One has already reached the state of perfection. Sva-anubhava, self-realization, direct experience of oneself. Anubhava is experience, sva-anubhava, direct experience of oneself. Svaprakasha, self-revealing, self-luminous. When we meditate on the formless, that's basically what we're doing. Our formless self is lit up, self-luminous, self-revealing. Svarupa is the actual or essential nature, the natural form. It's really more talking about a form. So, for instance, it may show up in the Gita because at one point Arjuna says, after Krishna has revealed his cosmic form, Arjuna says, oh, please show me your normal form. I mean, you're kind of scaring me here. Please show me your normal form. So that would be the Svarupa, your natural form. Svarupa sthiti means remaining in one's own natural condition. And finally, in this list, I shouldn't say finally, but in this list, Svatantra is from Kashmir Shaivism, and it means independent and not needing any external aids. So the mechanism, actually it's sort of like one's own mechanism, is internal. Okay. When we have homa fire, the various offerings that go into the fire are all followed by, almost all, sometimes there's a namaha, but almost all swaha, swaha, swaha. And it's actually also kind of, I think, non-translatable, but I'm just going to make an approximation. It's like, swaha means because you're offering it completely wholeheartedly, with your whole being. I am one with that. I am one with that. That is being worshipped, okay? That, to me, that's kind of what that means. As well as the next one, which we use the word all the time, the word swami, I've heard it translated as Lord, but it's actually two words, ami, I am, and swa, myself. I am myself. Or I am I. Very simple. Nothing added. Nothing else needs to be there. So before we get to, if there's any questions, before we get to that, I just want to make a concluding kind of statement. So what are we to do if our self-analysis reveals that we are indeed fragmented? Ramakrishna's prescription for the age is do japam. Remember divinity via the holy name, mantra. I like to think of it as, it's like putting money in the bank. So let's say you have a direct deposit set up from your checking account to your savings or something like that, and every week a certain amount goes in or whatever. Okay. Eventually, you're going to end up with a heck of a pile of money because of the idea of compound interest. Of course, the banks aren't paying anything now, so forget that. But this is the way it used to be, okay? So compound interest means you're earning interest on the interest. So they give you, let's say you put in $1, they give you 10 cents. So the next time you put in $1, they give you, 11 cents, whatever. So you've got $1, 10 cents, and 11 cents. You've got $1.21 already, okay? If that's a 10% interest kind of a thing. You really have to understand compound interest from the point of view of borrowing money and saving money. But if you apply this idea to japam, it's you keep making your deposits and you just let it sit. You never make a withdrawal, okay? You never make a withdrawal. You just let it accumulate. And eventually it will manifest in your favor. Now, there's a flaw in this analogy, which is that money is a quantity, is quantifiable, and I'm not talking, japam is not quantifiable. It's a qualitative kind of a thing. So we actually are, shall we say, living off the interest in a sense, because over time things do change. You're working on yourself from the inside out, and as long as you're trying to become aligned and you're trying to become integrated, this sincere doing of japam will help accomplish that. So, do we have a mic? Well, if anybody has a question, come up and use this mic. Anybody got a question? I'll let you think about it for a minute. I think I came across a little too strongly. Okay. Om sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashantu ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from ailments. May all beings perceive the good. May not anyone undergo suffering. Om Shanti Shanti.